So I have my engine cradle up here, foam, so that I can set the shell on it and I don't have to worry about damaging it. And now I am going to, let's see, where did that guy go? I'm going to make sure that this looks good first. So I'm going to position it on there right where I want it. So I'll go ahead and glue this. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the glue onto the shell because, as you can see, there's not a lot to glue to. And this is another reason why I like to not rely on just epoxy or glue. I like to do the screws as well. So I'm going to get this set with glue. That'll hold it in place. Then I'll be able to drill it and screw into it. So here I go with the glue, and again I'll just put the glue onto the shell because that relieves any excess glue that could get all over and create a mess. And then I'm going to try to do this on camera. It was a little difficult getting the right angle. I retook this shot a few times. So here I go, and I'm just making sure that I get it all lined up just the way I want it. And then this is super glue, so it does set up in, I think the gel sets up in about 25 seconds or so. So you have a little bit of time. So anyways, now I let it sit for about an hour and I'm ready to drill. So I found some screws that worked, and then I got a drill bit that was the correct size for the screws that I found. And all I'm going to do is punch a hole all the way through, 2 holes in each pilot. So that'll be 2 screws or bolts or whatever you choose to use in each pilot. And then I'm going to use a countersink on the top and use, I forget what they call it now. I don't think it's a pan head screw, but one that's tapered at the head so that the taper will sit down. As you can see, here's where I'm running the countersink. And I'll just run that until it is deep enough for the screws, and that'll allow the screws to sit flush. So there's the screws, and as you can see, they're very long, but it's what I had on hand, and I have, just from different stuff around the house, I have a lot of different screws. So it doesn't really matter the length, as you can just cut them off after they are installed. So there it is, nice and flush. Put the other one in, and then I will go ahead and use the Dremel here and just remove any excess screw. I would recommend wearing safety glasses. As you can see, there's sparks flying. So I'm going to go ahead and just put a dot of glue on each screw to act as Loctite. Let that dry. And then I will come in and remove any of the excess residue from the, we had to remove the walkway tread, so I removed all the excess residue from MTH that MTH had put on there, and I'm just going to use the same super glue and then put some clamps on it. Now it is kind of challenging to get this down as flat as they do, because when you're taking it off, it kind of wrinkles it a little bit. But if you take your time, they're made out of brass, the walkway tread, and you can just form it back down and it'll fit just fine. So here I'm doing that and making sure that's all set into place. And then as you can see, the result is pretty darn good. And that's how I hide the screws. So here I go and just put some clamps on it, make sure that it gets held down while the super glue sets up. So now that we have that glued and screwed, it is time to put the shell back onto the chassis so that we can set the height for the coupler. Now, I'm going to be using the KD, I think they're, the 746s. The 805s are really good. They're a very good coupler, but they are the medium shank coupler, so just the standard shank. But I've found that the longer shank on these SD40-2s work a lot better. So I'd recommend getting some 746s with the long shank. So here I'm just showing the screws. KDs use 256 screws. So I just have a whole bunch of different little screws that I use for KDs. And there's one installed. So I got the spacer set, and I'm using the KD height gauge. So I use that height gauge to get the height for the coupler, if you're wondering. I would highly recommend getting that height gauge. That way everything, all of your rolling stock and everything, locomotives are at the same height. So with the couplers installed and at the correct height, I am just going to make up some filler pieces for a couple of spots on these locomotives. They do use the old Weaver tooling. Now they've obviously added on to the Weaver tooling, but the MTH shell. So there's a whole bunch of different spaces and gaps in these locomotives that just aren't there in real life. So I'm just going to be filling all those in. As you can see, there's a little strip up towards the top that needs to get filled in. And then obviously we will fill in around the coupler body as well to get rid of that huge hole. So I'll fit that piece in, and once I get it fitting nice, I will just go ahead and tack it in with some glue. And I'm not too concerned with gaps around this stuff, as you probably know from my previous videos, I do like to use that Squadron Products white putty just for filling minor gaps and cracks, so that you get a nice smooth look as if it were one pilot made out of one piece of metal. So here I go cutting the shims for the gaps around the coupler. And again, just measure what size you need, cut a piece of styrene, and then here I'm going to show you how I notch it out. So I lay mine in flat. Some people stack the styrene. I've just found it easiest to lay it in there flat and make it a semi-snug fit, and then just go on the back side and glue it. So that's what I'm doing now, and I'm just going to notch that out for around the coupler. And once that is done, we'll be able to install and then glue and then put the putty on. So there's the piece cut out, and it turned out pretty good. They fit in there nice and snug, and I will go ahead and press that in, and then show that on the back side we'll just run some glue, and I'll do the same thing for the back side. And here I'll show you the gluing process. So as you can see, I fit it in there snug, and then just along that back side just put some dots of glue, and that'll be plenty to hold that. Again, it's just a filler piece. And sometimes I'll use a small piece of styrene just to smooth out any bumps. So here I go with the gap filling, and there you can see I did the front up already. Now, I did decide to reuse the detail parts that came with the locomotive, and I'll show how to make them a little bit more realistic. So I went back and knocked out the areas that knocked out the holes for all the detail parts. But here you can see I just take the file and do more filing. This takes a little bit of time, but the end result will give you a fine finish and smooth out that front pilot to make it look more realistic and add the detail that you need. So anyways, thanks for watching, and stay tuned for part 4.